Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to be showing you how to mix your lead vocals to sit perfectly inside the mix. Okay, so today I'm going to be breaking down a finished vocal for you. I figured that was the best way to explain to you how to sit your vocals inside your mix. So we're going to be breaking down three main components, and then we're going to talk a little bit about something extra. So the first thing we're going to talk about is EQ on your vocal. Then we're going to talk about compression. And the little extra thing there is going to be a little bit of de-essing. And the final thing, the third thing we're going to talk about is effects. So reverb in this case, okay? So let's get started. So to start things off here, I'm going to show you this raw vocal. So I'm going to disable the EQ and compression and disable the effects here. And I'm going to show you what this vocal sounds like with no effects, no EQ, no compression, no reverb, just raw inside the track, okay? So here we go.
You know how to draw me in, you know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before, it keeps me crawling back to you. And I don't know if it's fate, but oh, it fills me with hate. I can't trust myself, 'cause all it takes is one step.
So before you start anything, before you start adding EQ or compression, you want to get the right vocal level inside your mix, okay? So right here at about -2.9 is a good balance. We can hear the low parts and the loud parts aren't too loud, okay? So you want to find that right balance before you start mixing your vocal. Otherwise, this volume will change how you EQ and how you compress your vocal. All right, so to start off here, we're going to turn on this EQ and we're going to break down each component of this EQ here, okay? So we're going to start with just the high pass, all right? So we'll turn off these other things and we'll take a listen with just the high pass, okay?
You know how to draw me in, you know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before, it keeps me crawling back to you.
So you can see we're just getting rid of all of that excess low end, all of that stuff we don't need down there. You can see there's a bunch of stuff going on down here.
How to draw me.
We don't need any of that. We don't need any of that taking up space. So we're just bringing this high pass up to about 200 hertz here, okay? So the next thing we're going to attack here before we feed this into the compressor is we're going to get rid of a little bit of this low mid energy, okay? So right here around 320 mark.
You know how to draw me in, you know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before, it keeps me crawling.
So that right there is all that low mid mud that we want to pull out of our vocal, okay? So right around that 320 mark, that's that kind of muffly, that kind of sound. We want to get rid of that, okay? So we're going to pull that back down to about -2.5, okay? So here's what that sounds like with that pulled out.
You know how to draw me in, you know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before, it keeps me crawling back to you.
So the next thing we're going to pull out right here is just a little bit of this mid-range here, okay? So even visually you can see right here there's some peaks when he's emphasizing some of these words, okay? So listen beforehand.
You know how to draw me in, you know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before.
So those are those nosy frequencies. That's that kind of nasal area. That's that stuff we want to pull out there to clean up his vocal a little bit, okay? It's just a little bit too, because we don't want to take away too much emphasis from those words, okay?
You know how to draw me in, you know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before, it keeps me crawling back.
So this is where you want to listen to your part, okay? So if this was a lower range part, we would pull more of this out because we don't want that nasalness in there. But because this is a higher range part, this is kind of your weight right here. This kind of 200 to 1K area, that's your weight where you're going to get your consonants and stuff, okay? So we want to keep that in there. We don't want to pull out too much, okay?
You know how to draw me in, you know, even if it's a sin, it's been.
Great, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take away just a touch more of that high mid area, okay? So I'll show you what that sounds like when I boost that, okay?
You know how to draw me
right there at like 1.5K, there's a little bit of sharpness on some of those words, okay? So we're just gonna pull not even a whole dB out. We're just gonna pull half a dB out there, okay? This is a subtle move, okay? So listen beforehand, and then I'll kick it in. You can hear what it does.
You know how to draw me. You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before it.
So it's just on some of those words he emphasizes. We get a little bit too much of that high mid area. It gets a little sharp. So we're just pulling it a touch back, okay? And these things will sound a little bit more exaggerated when we kick the compressor on as well. Last thing we're gonna do here is we're gonna take away about a dB of this high end area, high mid area. We're doing about 4K. We're taking about a dB out, okay? So I'll play you what that sounds like without. Then we'll boost it. You can hear what range we're pulling out, and we'll pull it out.
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before. It keeps me crawling back to you.
So again, because this is a higher part, this range we would usually be boosting on a vocal, right? You want a little bit more high end on your vocal, excuse me, but because it's a higher part, it's a little bit edgy there. So we're pulling just a dB out there, okay? So it's not too edgy, but it still has some high end to it, all right? The next thing we're gonna do here is we're gonna engage the compressor, okay? And I'll show you what we're doing with this compressor, all right? So here's without, and then I'll kick it in.
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before. It keeps me crawling back to you.
So visually here in this first passage, you can see we've got some lines, some words that are a little bit louder. Here, these are a little bit louder. And then we've got some passages like this one here. It's a little quiet. The ending's a little bit too quiet. So this compressor is gonna catch those louder parts, and it's gonna even out this vocal. So we have a nice solid lead vocal that's gonna sit right in our mix, okay? So we'll kick this compressor on. You can see what it's doing there.
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written.
So right there, watch the meter here, okay? So these passages here, it's really gonna be knocking down those louder words, okay? And then we're gonna get to this quieter passage here, and you can see the compressor's not really doing much, if even anything.
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written.
Maybe a dB on this passage here. But these louder passages, we're knocking down 7, 10 dB there.
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written.
But you can see when we kick that compressor on like that and we're knocking down those louder parts, we're getting a nice even vocal tone there, okay? So these settings on this compressor are the standard settings you can pretty much use for a vocal when you're using an 1176, okay? So we're doing the fastest release, and we're doing a slower attack on this, but it's still a pretty fast attack on 1176, okay? And on the louder parts here, we're just doing, like I said, 7 to 10 dB of compression, okay?
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if.
And that can seem a little bit aggressive, 7, 10 dB of compression, but this is adding emotion, it's adding vibe, and it's enhancing the performance of the vocalist, okay? You don't want to go too crazy, otherwise you'll flatten out your vocal, and you don't want to do that. This is adding a little bit of vibe, it's enhancing the performance of the vocalist, okay? That's what we're going for. We want to even out the vocal, but we still want to enhance the performance, all right? So the next thing we're going to talk about, we're going to add that little bit of de-essing in, okay? So we'll listen beforehand. You can hear how the S's and some of the P's sound, the T's, okay?
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written. Yeah.
So that passage right there, even if it's a sin, so you can see what this de-esser is doing on those S's there.
Even if it's a sin, it's been written years before. Even if it's a sin, it's been written.
Now that looks like a lot, right? But take a listen one more time without.
Even if it's a sin, it's been written.
Those S's right there really stick out inside the mix, okay? So we turn this de-esser on. Well, this is just a multi-band here. We're just compressing just 4K and up on this vocal, okay? So it's acting as a de-esser. We're just attacking that high-end part.
Even if it's a sin, it's been written
Those S's, that part there feels like it's part of the vocal rather than popping out and being emphasized, okay? So one more time without, and then one more time with.
Even if it's a sin, it's been written.
And one more time with.
Even if it's a sin, it's been written. Years before, it keeps me crawling back to you.
Okay, so before we move on to the effects, let's review what we did, okay? So we did EQ, we're pulling out some of the muddiness, some of the nasalness, so those parts don't poke through in the mix, okay? We want a nice, even vocal frequency range. We don't want anything popping out. Then we got a compressor, okay? That's evening out our vocal volume, okay? So these louder passages, that compressor's attacking those and pulling those down while preserving the quieter passages here, so they're even in volume with the louder passages, okay? So that's gonna give us a solid, level vocal tone that's going to sit inside the mix. It's not going to go up and down. There's not going to be parts that you can't hear and parts that stick way out front, okay? This is an even vocal tone that's going to sit level in the mix, okay? And the last thing here we added was our deesser, okay? So that passage there that we just listened to, those S's sticked out, right? You don't want anything to stick out like that, okay? So this last part here, this deesser, is making sure our S's and our T's don't pop out on the mix, okay? They stay right even with the vocal, and it's going to be something that's going to be level all the way through our vocal line, okay? So let's take a listen to how our vocal's sounding at the moment, and then we will move on to adding effects, okay? So the effects are going to be our addition of depth, okay?
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before. It keeps me crawling back to you.
Okay, so our EQ, our compression, and our deesser got us a level vocal with an even tone. Now we want to sit that vocal inside the mix, okay? Because it still sounds a little bit disjointed. We have this dry vocal sitting in this room of instruments, okay? We want to add a little bit of wetness to it so it sounds like it's in the same room as these instruments, okay? So we're adding a little bit of a plate reverb here, and I'll show you what this plate is, okay? So it's about a 2-second plate with 150 millisecond delay, 152 millisecond delay. The pre-delay there is so that the reverb doesn't muddy up our vocal, okay? So if we have the vocal going and the reverb going at the same time, that reverb's gonna muddy up our vocal a little bit, and we don't want that to happen, okay? So our 152 millisecond pre-delay is gonna make sure our vocal happens and then our reverb happens, okay? So you hear your vocal and your reverb separately rather than sitting on top of each other, so they don't muddy each other up. And then following our reverb there on the send is just a little bit of EQ. We're wiping off the low end, we're wiping off the super highs, and then this just here is so we don't have any kind of ringing frequency in our high-mid area, okay? So I'll play you what this vocal sounds like by itself, and we'll click on the reverb so you can hear it in solos. You can hear what that's doing, okay?
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before. It keeps me crawling back to you.
Okay, so you hear what that's doing? Without that reverb, your vocal's sitting way up front, okay? It's like way out in front of the band. When we click that reverb in, it gives it a little bit of depth, okay? It pulls it back, and it's gonna sit it perfectly inside our mix here, okay? So we'll do that same thing one more time, but we'll do it inside the mix with the other instruments, okay? So here's without the reverb, and then I'll click that reverb on, and you can hear how it sits that vocal inside the mix, inside the band, okay?
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before. It keeps me crawling back to you. And I don't know if it's fate, but oh, it fills me with hate. I can't trust myself, 'cause all it takes.
So we'll take a listen to this line here one more time. You can hear a little bit of the trail of the reverb. Again, this is subtle, but this is something that's going to sit your vocal inside the mix rather than way on top of the mix, okay? So listen without the reverb, okay? You can hear how this line sits kind of on top of the mix, not with the band. And then we'll do it one more time. We'll kick that reverb in, and you can hear how it kind of glues together with the song.
But oh, it fills me with hate.
So that was dry. Here's with the reverb.
But oh, it fills me with hate. I can't trust myself.
And you hear how that pre-delay is working there on the end. We'll take a listen to that last line, okay? So with the pre-delay, you hear the reverb after that line is finished.
Fills me with hate.
So we get a little bit of a tail there, okay? So that's it, folks. Those are our 3 main components and a little bit of a bonus there on how to mix vocals to sit perfectly inside your mix, to sit them with the band, okay? So we have our EQ, we're pulling out any muddiness, getting rid of any low end we don't need, attacking any nasalness, any high edginess. Then we have our compressor, we're evening out the volume, okay? Our EQ evens out our frequency, our compressor is gonna even out our volume, okay? Then we have our deesser, all right? That's taking care of any S's, any T's that are poking out. We're sitting those inside the vocal. And finally, our third element here is our effects, okay? So our effects sit the vocal inside the mix with the band, so it's not a dry vocal sitting on top of a wet mix, okay? That is it. We'll take a listen one more time to the finished vocal, and that'll be it.
You know how to draw me in. You know, even if it's a sin, it's been written years before. It keeps me crawling back to you.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you need a pro vocal mix on your song, click the link in the description, head on over to Sumthins Recording, and request a quote for your next project. And I will see you guys in the next video.